123,000. That is the number of Japanese soldiers who perished in a single, brutal campaign, not from direct combat, but from disease, starvation, and the unforgiving jungle. It was a hellish proving ground where an audacious strategy, born of a general's unyielding will, would redefine the very nature of warfare in the Pacific. But could such a relentless, almost surgical approach truly break the spirit of an enemy determined to fight to the last man? In the crucible of the Second World War's Pacific theater, one figure stands as both a symbol of unwavering determination and a lightning rod for controversy: General of the Army Douglas MacArthur. Born on January 26, 1880, in Little Rock, Arkansas, MacArthur was the son of Lieutenant General Arthur MacArthur, Jr., a decorated Civil War veteran and a former military governor of the Philippines. Douglas MacArthur followed his father's footsteps, graduating first in his class from the United States Military Academy at West Point in 1903. His early career saw him serving as an engineering officer in the Philippines, an aide-de-camp to his father, and a decorated officer in World War I, where he earned 7 Silver Stars and 2 Distinguished Service Crosses. He later became the youngest superintendent of West Point and, in 1930, the Chief of Staff of the U.S. Army. MacArthur was known for his commanding presence, his theatrical flair, and an almost messianic belief in his own destiny. By 1943, MacArthur served as the Supreme Commander of Allied forces in the Southwest Pacific area. His command stretched across a vast, unforgiving expanse of ocean and jungle, facing a deeply entrenched and fanatically determined Imperial Japanese Army. The strategic situation was dire. The Japanese had swept across the Pacific, seizing key territories, including the Philippines, from which MacArthur himself had been forced to withdraw in 1942, famously vowing, "I shall return." Australia, the primary base for MacArthur's operations, remained under threat. The task before him: push back the Japanese tide, clear the crucial island of New Guinea, and ultimately, liberate the Philippines. The forces under his command, including American, Australian, and Filipino troops, faced not only a formidable enemy but also the brutal realities of tropical disease, dense jungles, and treacherous terrain. The stage is set for a campaign of unprecedented scale and ferocity. The path to victory in the Southwest Pacific was anything but clear. General Douglas MacArthur faced a confluence of formidable obstacles, both external and internal. Command skepticism plagued his grand designs. Washington strategists, including Chief of Naval Operations Admiral Ernest King and Admiral Chester Nimitz, often favored a Central Pacific drive towards Formosa, Taiwan, as the primary route to Japan, believing it offered a more direct path and better naval support. MacArthur, however, vehemently advocated for his Southwest Pacific approach, particularly his sacred pledge to return to the Philippines. This strategic divergence often meant a struggle for resources, with MacArthur frequently feeling his theater was inadequately supported in terms of personnel and materiel, especially compared to the European War. Beyond the political battles, the physical conditions of the theater presented an enemy as lethal as any Japanese soldier. New Guinea, the immediate objective in 1943, was a vast, mountainous, and jungle-covered island, stretching 1,600 miles along its northern coastline. It was a land of dense rainforests, malarial swamps, and extreme humidity, where disease, particularly malaria, was rampant, debilitating Allied troops at an alarming rate. Logistical challenges were immense. Moving supplies, equipment, and men through such terrain was a constant, grueling battle. The Japanese, meanwhile, had established impressive defensive works. They dug in with a tenacity that defied conventional assault, utilizing natural terrain to their advantage, constructing elaborate networks of pillboxes, trenches, and hidden strongholds. Their strategy often involved defense in depth, reverse-slope defenses, and masterly concealment, forcing Allied forces to pay a heavy price for every yard gained. They were about to be proven catastrophically wrong in their expectation of direct, frontal assaults. MacArthur, frustrated by the attritional battles of early New Guinea, would pivot to an innovative, leapfrogging strategy, bypassing heavily fortified Japanese positions and striking at less defended areas, often cutting off and isolating large enemy formations to wither on the vine. This approach, while effective, meant leaving thousands of Japanese soldiers bypassed, a constant, lingering threat in the RE.AR areas. The stage was set for a brutal, protracted struggle against both man and nature. The year 1943 dawns with General Douglas MacArthur's forces locked in a grueling, attritional struggle for New Guinea. The initial phase of the campaign, which began in 1942, saw Allied forces, primarily Australians, fighting to defend Port Moresby and later engaging in costly battles at Buna and Gona. By January 22, 1943, the Japanese stronghold at Buna on New Guinea's northern coast is finally defeated after a brutal battle of attrition. This victory, however hard-won, underscores the immense cost of direct assaults against deeply entrenched Japanese positions. MacArthur, now commanding the newly formed 6th U.S. Army under Lieutenant General Walter Kruger, begins to refine his strategy. He understands that to break the deadlock and conserve Allied lives, a new approach is essential. This new approach, often called leapfrogging or island hopping, involves bypassing heavily fortified Japanese strongholds and instead seizing less defended areas, cutting off enemy supply lines, and allowing bypassed garrisons to be neutralized through isolation and starvation. The first major test of this revised strategy comes in January 1944. The 6th Army launches an amphibious assault on Sidor, on New Guinea's northern coast, aiming to seize the Vitiaz Strait. This operation is a success, securing a vital position and further isolating Japanese forces to the east. The relentless Allied advance along the northern New Guinea coastline continues. In April 1944, MacArthur directs Kruger to seize Hollandia, a major Japanese supply base. On April 22, 1944, elements of the U.S. First Corps execute Operation Reckless and Persecution, landing at Hollandia and Leyte. The landings are swift, surprising the Japanese, who had anticipated a landing at Hansa Bay due to intercepted intelligence. Engineers rapidly construct forward air bases, crucial for extending Allied air superiority. This cyclical strategy, integrating air, naval, and ground forces, proves highly effective. The pace quickens. In May 1944, U.S. forces assault Wakdi and Biak, securing more critical airfields. The Battle of Biak, in particular, proves to be a hard-fought engagement, demonstrating the Japanese willingness to defend every inch of ground. However, the Allied momentum is undeniable. In July 1944, Noemfor and Sansapor fall to MacArthur's forces. By the fall of 1944, the 6th Army has secured New Guinea sufficiently to serve as a launchpad for the next, highly anticipated phase, the liberation of the Philippines. The New Guinea Campaign, though often overshadowed, is a strategic triumph. It protects Australia, provides the essential stepladder for the Philippines, and demonstrates the effectiveness of MacArthur's leapfrogging strategy. The cost, however, is immense. Approximately 16,850 American and over 17,000 Australian casualties are suffered. The Japanese lose an estimated 123,000 to 202,100 killed, with more than half succumbing to disease, untreated wounds, and starvation rather than direct combat. MacArthur's focus now shifts entirely to the Philippines, a territory he considers a moral obligation to liberate. His "I shall return" pledge, made in 1942, resonates deeply with the Filipino people and is a powerful motivator for him. Despite the Navy's preference for an advance on Formosa, President Franklin D. Roosevelt ultimately sides with MacArthur, recognizing the political and moral imperative of fulfilling his promise. The plan for the Philippines campaign, codenamed Operation Musketeer I, II, and III, begins with Leyte. On October 20, 1944, after extensive airstrikes and naval bombardment, MacArthur's troops, primarily the U.S. 6th Army, land on the eastern coast of Leyte. The initial landings are largely uncontested, as the Japanese have chosen to establish their main defenses further inland, beyond the range of naval gunfire. General Douglas MacArthur himself dramatically wades ashore at Palo, Leyte, accompanied by President Sergio Osmeña of the Philippines. From the beach, he delivers his iconic radio address, declaring, "People of the Philippines, I have returned. By the grace of Almighty God, our forces stand again on Philippine soil, soil consecrated in the blood of our two peoples." This moment, however triumphant, marks only the beginning of a brutal campaign. The Japanese Imperial Navy launches its defensive plan, Show 1, even before the Leyte landing. This massive naval operation aims to trap the American fleet in a pincer movement within Leyte Gulf. The Battle of Leyte Gulf, fought from October 23 to 26, 1944, becomes the largest naval battle in history. Vice Admiral Thomas Kinkaid's 7th Fleet, supporting the amphibious assault with over 700 ships, including transports and minesweepers, is tasked with protecting the landings. Admiral William Bull Halsey's 3rd Fleet, comprising 17 aircraft carriers, dozens of destroyers, and 6 battleships, provides crucial air cover and acts as the primary fighting force against the Japanese main fleet. The battle unfolds in 4 major engagements: the Battle of the Sibuyan Sea, the Battle of Surigao Strait, the Battle off Cape Engano, and the Battle off Samar. In the Sibuyan Sea, American aircraft inflict significant damage on Admiral Takeo Kurida's powerful central force, including the super battleship Musashi. Simultaneously, the Japanese Northern Force, under Vice Admiral Gisaburo Ozawa, sails south, its 4 aircraft carriers acting as decoys. Ozawa's carriers carry few aircraft or experienced pilots, a deliberate sacrifice. His mission is to lure Halsey's formidable 3rd Fleet away from Leyte Gulf, leaving Kinkaid's 7th Fleet vulnerable to Kurida's approaching Central Force and Nishimura's Southern Force. The Japanese High Command believes this audacious plan, though costly, is their last chance to disrupt the American landings and potentially turn the tide. They are aware of their dwindling resources and the overwhelming Allied air superiority, but the imperative to defend the Philippines, a critical link in their supply lines, drives them to this desperate gamble. They anticipate American commanders will prioritize the destruction of their carriers, not realizing the deep-seated divisions in Allied command structure and the potential for miscommunication. This belief in their ability to manipulate Allied responses, even with a sacrificial force, underscores their commitment to a decisive naval engagement, a commitment that ultimately proves fatal. Halsey, eager to engage the Japanese carriers, takes the bait, steaming north with the bulk of his 3rd Fleet, leaving the San Bernardino Strait largely unguarded. This decision leaves Kinkaid's 7th Fleet exposed. In the early hours of October 25, Admiral Shoji Nishimura's Southern Force attempts to force the Surigao Strait, where it is met by Kinkaid's battle line, including 6 old battleships, many of which were salvaged from Pearl Harbor. In a classic naval engagement, reminiscent of earlier centuries, Nishimura's force is decimated by American torpedoes and gunfire. Meanwhile, Kurida's Central Force, after suffering losses in the Sibuyan Sea, passes through the unguarded San Bernardino Strait and surprises a small force of American escort carriers and destroyers off Samar. This desperate engagement, known as the Battle off Samar, sees the vastly outgunned American destroyers and escort carriers fighting heroically, confusing Kurida into believing he is facing a much larger force. After several hours of intense fighting, and inexplicably, Kurida orders his force to withdraw, missing a golden opportunity to attack the vulnerable transports in Leyte Gulf. The Battle of Leyte Gulf is a decisive American victory. The Imperial Japanese Navy suffers catastrophic losses, including 4 carriers, 3 battleships, 6 heavy cruisers, and numerous other vessels. It effectively cripples the Japanese Navy as an offensive force for the remainder of the war. Despite the naval triumph, the ground campaign on Leyte proves to be a brutal, drawn-out affair. Japanese resistance stiffens significantly inland. The island is declared secured on December 25, 1944, but fierce mopping-up operations continue well into 1945, with approximately 75,000 Japanese soldiers killed or captured during these extended actions. What does it tell you about a man that he made that choice with everything to lose, defying Central Command and risking his career for a promise? Tell me in the comments. With Leyte secured, the focus shifts to Mindoro, an island directly south of Luzon. On December 15, 1944, Brigadier General William C. Dunkel's forces, supported by the 7th Fleet, capture Mindoro. The objective is to establish airfields capable of extending American air superiority over Luzon and Manila Bay. Mindoro is lightly defended by the Japanese, and Filipino guerrillas control much of the island, allowing for a relatively swift takeover. By December 28, 2 airbases are operational, ready to support the main invasion of Luzon. The largest and most strategically vital island in the Philippines, Luzon, becomes the next objective. On January 9, 1945, the U.S. 6th Army, under Lieutenant General Walter Kruger, launches an amphibious assault at Lingayen Gulf on Luzon's northwestern coast. Despite fierce kamikaze attacks on the invasion fleet, the landing force itself encounters minimal initial resistance on the beaches. Within a few days, nearly 175,000 men established a 20-mile beachhead. The Japanese commander in the Philippines, General Tomoyuki Yamashita, known as the Tiger of Malaya, has learned from the Leyte experience. Instead of attempting to repel the Americans at the beaches, he withdraws his main force of nearly 230,000 soldiers inland, establishing strong defensive positions in the mountains of northern Luzon, particularly in the Cordillera Central and Sierra Madre ranges. Yamashita's strategy is to prolong the conflict, tie down American divisions, and inflict maximum casualties, thereby gaining time for the defense of the Japanese home islands. The advance inland is arduous. MacArthur, impatient with the pace of progress towards Manila, orders a rapid drive south. The 6th Army pushes through the Central Plains. On January 23, American forces reach the outskirts of Clark Field, where they encounter stubborn Japanese resistance, leading to intense fighting for control of the area. By the end of January, Clark Field is reclaimed, and the push towards Manila resumes. To accelerate the liberation of Manila and its significant prisoner of war camps, MacArthur orders 2 additional assaults. In mid-January, a second amphibious landing takes place southwest of Manila. Weeks later, regiments of the 11th Airborne Division execute parachute drops south of the capital, creating a multi-pronged assault. The Battle for Manila, from February 3 to March 3, 1945, proves to be one of the most brutal urban battles of the Pacific War. Elements of the U.S. 1st Cavalry Division and the 37th Infantry Division enter the northern outskirts of Manila on February 3. However, Japanese naval forces, under Rear Admiral Sanji Iwabuchi, refuse to evacuate the city, turning it into a fortress. Japanese defenders, numbering around 16,000, fight relentlessly from fortified buildings, tunnels, and barricades. Street by street, house by house fighting ensues. American and Filipino forces face fierce resistance, often resorting to heavy artillery and flamethrowers to clear buildings. The fighting reduces much of the historic city to ruins. The civilian population suffers horrifically. Japanese troops commit widespread atrocities, including massacres, rape, and torture, against Filipino civilians trapped in the crossfire. An estimated 100,000 to 150,000 Filipino civilians die during the battle, many killed by Japanese Marines, others caught in the intense shelling. Manila becomes the second most devastated city in World War II, after Warsaw. By February 11, the 11th Airborne Division captures the last Japanese outer defenses, completing the encirclement of the city. Clearing operations continue for weeks. Military casualties in Manila alone are severe. 1,010 Americans, 3,079 Filipinos, and 16,000 Japanese killed. The battle for Luzon, however, is far from over. While MacArthur declares Manila retaken by March, General Yamashita's main force remains deeply entrenched in the mountains of northern Luzon. The campaign transforms into a protracted struggle against a determined enemy fighting from prepared positions in extremely difficult terrain. If you had been one of the civilians trapped in Manila, knowing the fighting would reduce your home to rubble, what choice would you have made? Tell me in the comments. The U.S. 6th and 8th Armies are committed to rooting out Yamashita's forces. The fighting in these mountainous regions is characterized by small unit actions, relentless patrols, and brutal close-quarters combat. The Japanese utilized their defense-in-depth tactics, forcing American troops to meticulously clear every ridge and village. American planes drop over 1 million gallons of napalm in support of ground forces, a testament to the ferocity of the Japanese resistance. The campaign continues through the spring and summer of 1945. Organized resistance in southern Luzon and the Bicol Peninsula is cleared by the 11th Airborne Division by the end of May. However, pockets of Japanese resistance east of Manila persist until mid-June. The most stubborn resistance is found in the mountains of northwestern Luzon, where Yamashita's remaining forces cling to their strongholds. The Battle of Leyte Pass, fought between March and May 1945, becomes another bloody chapter, as elements of the U.S. 25th and 32nd Infantry Divisions slowly grind down Japanese defenses. The Japanese hold strategic heights, forcing American troops to advance inch by agonizing inch, often under heavy machine gun and artillery fire. Casualties mount on both sides. The scale of the Luzon campaign is immense. 10 divisions and 5 independent regiments see action. The terrain and climate continue to take a heavy toll, with non-battle casualties, primarily from disease, exceeding combat casualties. From January 9 through June 30, 1945, the 6th Army on Luzon suffers 93,422 non-combat casualties, including 260 deaths. During the same period, battle casualties for the 6th Army totaled 37,854, with 8,140 killed in action. Overall American battle casualties for the Luzon campaign are almost 47,000, with 10,380 killed and 36,550 wounded. The Japanese suffered devastating losses, with an estimated 192,000 to 217,000 combatants dead, many from starvation and disease due to Allied encirclement and disrupted supply lines. Which side of this story do you think history got wrong? The brutal necessity of MacArthur's advance or the desperate defense of Yamashita's forces? Tell me in the comments. Simultaneously with the Luzon operations, MacArthur also directs the reconquest of the southern Philippines and Borneo. Mindanao, the second largest island, which was initially considered a primary target, becomes the last major island to be retaken. On March 10, 1945, the 41st Infantry Division lands at Zamboanga in southwestern Mindanao. On April 17, the 10th Corps begins landings in central Mindanao, moving inland to seize the island's interior. Filipino resistance fighters provide invaluable assistance to the 10th Corps, guiding them through the jungle and fighting alongside them against the Japanese. However, isolated pockets of Japanese resistance on Mindanao, like those on Luzon, persist until the very end of the war. The fighting across the Philippines is characterized by intense ferocity and brutality from both sides. Japanese troops earn a reputation for tenacious resistance and brutality, often fighting to the last man. The campaign exacts an immense human cost, especially on the Filipino civilian population. It is estimated that between 1 million and 1.1 million Filipinos die during World War II, a staggering 5% of the wartime population, with many perishing during the intense fighting for their liberation. The humid air hangs heavy over the Cagayan Valley in northern Luzon, a suffocating blanket of heat in anticipation. It is August 1945. For months, the remaining Japanese forces under General Tomoyuki Yamashita, numbering approximately 50,000, have been systematically driven into the remote, rugged mountains. Their once formidable strength is now a shadow, ravaged by ceaseless combat, relentless American and Filipino pressure, and the insidious enemies of starvation and disease. Supplies are virtually non-existent. Ammunition is critically low. Yet, their fanatical resolve remains unbroken. They dig into a final, formidable redoubt, a maze of caves, tunnels, and fortified positions in the Kiongan-Bontoc-Maoyao Triangle. Every ridge, every ravine, every hidden cave mouth is a potential killing zone. Elements of the U.S. 37th Infantry Division and the 6th Infantry Division, along with highly effective Filipino guerrilla units, have relentlessly pursued Yamashita's forces. The American lines, stretched thin but determined, slowly tighten around the Japanese strongholds. The fighting is no longer about grand maneuvers or swift amphibious assaults. It is a grinding, agonizing war of attrition, fought hand-to-hand in the dense jungle and on steep, unforgiving slopes. Flamethrowers become essential tools, clearing out caves and bunkers where Japanese soldiers refuse to surrender, choosing instead to fight to the death. Radio intercepts reveal the desperate state of the Japanese. Orders from Yamashita speak of conserving ammunition, of fighting with bayonets and bare hands when bullets run out. The messages are filled with a grim determination, a refusal to accept defeat even as their physical capacity to resist wanes. American forward observers report seeing gaunt, emaciated Japanese soldiers, often clad in tattered uniforms, still capable of launching suicidal banzai charges in the dead of night. On August 9, 1945, news of the atomic bombing of Nagasaki reaches the Pacific. 3 days prior, Hiroshima had suffered the same fate. The world is changing, but in the isolated mountain redoubts of Luzon, the war continues its brutal, localized rhythm. MacArthur's headquarters, however, is now focused on the imminent end of the war, preparing for the formal surrender of Japan. Messages are relayed to Yamashita, urging him to surrender, to spare his remaining men from further, pointless sacrifice. Yamashita, however, remains defiant, at least initially. He believes his primary duty is to protect the emperor and the homeland, and tying down American forces on Luzon serves that purpose. His men continue to fight, often in small, desperate groups, launching ambushes and making costly, localized stands. The 37th Infantry Division reports encountering fierce resistance near Kiongan, with Japanese machine gun nests holding U.P. advances for hours despite being critically low on ammunition. Filipino guerrillas, intimately familiar with the terrain, play a crucial role, guiding American patrols and pinpointing enemy positions that regular forces might never find. Then, on August 15, 1945, the Imperial Japanese Emperor Hirohito announces Japan's unconditional surrender. The news slowly filters through the remote corners of Luzon. For the American and Filipino troops, it brings a mix of immense relief and disbelief. For the Japanese, it is a devastating blow, a betrayal of their warrior code. Yet, even with the emperor's decree, General Yamashita does not immediately surrender. His command is fragmented, and communications are difficult. For several days, scattered fighting continues as some Japanese units, either unaware of the surrender or refusing to accept it, continue to resist. It takes direct orders, delivered by emissaries under white flags, and the explicit command from his superiors in Tokyo, to finally convince Yamashita. On September 2, 1945, aboard the USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay, the formal surrender ceremony takes place, presided over by General Douglas MacArthur. It is a moment of profound historical significance, marking the end of World War II. But the final act for the Luzon campaign unfolds days later. On September 3, 1945, General Tomoyuki Yamashita, along with his remaining senior staff, emerges from the mountain redoubts near Kiongan, Ifugao Province. He is clad in his full-dress uniform, his sword at his side, a picture of dignity and defeat. He formally surrenders to Major General Robert L. Eichelberger, commander of the U.S. 8th Army, at Camp John Hay in Baguio. Over 50,000 Japanese soldiers, emaciated and defeated, follow his lead, laying down their arms. The long, brutal campaign for Luzon, which began on January 9, 1945, is finally, truly over. The campaigns orchestrated by General Douglas MacArthur in the Southwest Pacific from 1943 to 1945 left an indelible mark on the course of World War II and the subsequent geopolitical landscape. His leapfrogging strategy, which prioritized bypassing heavily fortified Japanese strongholds in New Guinea and the Philippines, proved remarkably effective in conserving Allied lives and accelerating the advance towards Japan. This innovative approach minimized the direct cost of frontal assaults, though it often meant leaving large numbers of Japanese troops isolated to perish from disease and starvation. The New Guinea Campaign, concluded by late 1944, secured Australia and provided the critical staging areas for the return to the Philippines. The liberation of the Philippines, MacArthur's personal crusade, fulfilled his famous, "I shall return" promise and had profound strategic and psychological consequences. It cut vital Japanese supply lines to Southeast Asia and the Dutch East Indies, further strangling their war economy. The Battle of Leyte Gulf, the largest naval battle in history, effectively destroyed the Imperial Japanese Navy's offensive capabilities, securing Allied control of the Pacific. However, the victory came at an immense cost. The Philippines Campaign, lasting from October 1944 to August 1945, was one of the bloodiest of the Pacific War. American battle casualties totaled over 20,712 killed and 50,954 wounded across the entire campaign, with Luzon alone accounting for 10,380 killed and 36,550 wounded from the 6th and 8th Armies. Non-battle casualties, primarily from disease, were even higher, with the 6th Army on Luzon suffering 93,422 non-combat casualties. Japanese losses were catastrophic, with an estimated 320,795 to 420,000 dead or missing across the Philippines, and 192,000 to 217,000 combatants perishing on Luzon, many from starvation and disease in the isolated mountain strongholds. Perhaps the most tragic legacy is the devastating impact on the Filipino civilian population. Between 500,000 and 1.1 million Filipinos died during World War II, a staggering toll that saw many caught in the brutal fighting and atrocities committed by Japanese forces, particularly during the Battle of Manila, where an estimated 100,000 to 150,000 civilians perished. The liberation, while celebrated, left the capital city in ruins, a testament to the ferocity of the urban combat. MacArthur's leadership, though undeniably successful, remained controversial. His strong personality and occasional disregard for conventional command structures sometimes put him at odds with other Allied leaders. Yet, his strategic vision and relentless drive were instrumental in the Allied victory in the Southwest Pacific. He would go on to oversee the occupation of Japan, implementing significant reforms that laid the foundation for its post-war recovery. In unexpected fact about the end of the Luzon campaign is that despite the official Japanese surrender on August 15, 1945, isolated pockets of Japanese resistance in Luzon's mountains continued fighting for weeks, with the formal surrender of General Yamashita and his forces not occurring until September 3, 1945, a full day after the official end of World War II. If this story moved you, if you think these men deserve to be remembered, leave one word in the comments: unbroken. Subscribe for a new forgotten story every week.